At Guantanamo Bay, we're confined to our quarters. We're scratching and sweating. We're waiting for orders. We're watching the harbor. We're counting the wrecks and we're wondering which we'll be shipping on next. Guantanamo Bay, call her Gitmo for short. Not much of a base, much less of a port. One look at the docks, and you know that you're seeing the goddamnedest hole in the whole Caribbean. So hurrah for old Gitmo on Cuba's fair shore, the home of the cockroach, the flea, and the whore. We'll sing them for praises and pray for the day we'll get the hell out of Guantanamo Bay.
Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to this wonderful group presentation. Today, we will be discussing and going over Guantanamo Bay Naval Station and its impact on both American and Cuban people today. What is Guantanamo Bay? From a general perspective, as many of you may or may not know, that's A-OK, that's exactly why we're here today. Guantanamo Bay, or Gitmo, has had the reputation of being the military base where all the most high-profile terrorists, most dangerous criminals are being held, interrogated, and locked up today. That's very, very true in modern times. However, it wasn't always like that. Guantanamo Bay, or Gitmo, has had a very extensive history, as well as various changes and many adaptations to many different administrations, as well as revolutions and change in power. So let's take it way back to the very beginning so we can all get a clear understanding of how Guantanamo Bay first became to be and how it is that it's able to be what it is today and how it is that it survived through all these various adaptations. How exactly was the United States able to own a part of Cuba and remain intact for over a century, well over 100 years? That's the question to ask. It all begins when the U.S. was first beginning to establish its dominance over the seas, and when the rise of the U.S. Navy was really beginning to reach a climax and was beginning to be at its most prominent point. Teddy Roosevelt, or more formally known as our 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt, was incredibly fascinated by naval powers and urged the American people and the administrations to update the naval fleet as well as naval technologies in general. Now, it served to the benefit that both Democrats and Republicans were in agreement to the strengthening of the Navy, and this served to benefit the actual foundation and establishment of Guantanamo Bay Naval Station. Government officials recognized the importance of having strategic positions all throughout the Caribbean, as well as having naval bases all over, and like I said, strategic positions, more importantly, to facilitate growing trade to emerging markets, as well as having a base in Guantanamo would ensure the creation of a modern and more well-rounded military with an enduring presence in the Caribbean. So the opportunity to establish such a prominent and strategic naval presence in the Caribbean, more specifically Cuba, came when the U.S. invaded Cuba in order to help the Cuban people liberate themselves from the Spanish regime in the summer of 1898 in the Spanish-American War. So across the 20th century, after this establishment, Guantanamo has extended to many uses, not just holding up terrorists, including coaling stations, ship repair, and also naval launching point, which was very important in World War II. And from that, many other uses came, just like facilitating hurricane relief in the Caribbean, and, like I've mentioned, the incarceration center for suspected terrorists. With all this being said, now that we have a more basic understanding of what Guantanamo Bay, or Gitmo, really is, and how it was established, we will now go into the next portion of this presentation, which will cover more in detail about what specifically went on as the years passed from the point of establishment to where we sit today. So without further ado, I will now pass you over to these two lovely ladies who will be taking over this presentation. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest.
The U.S. seized Guantanamo Bay, Cuba during the Spanish-American War of 1898. After decades of Cuba trying to gain its independence from Spain, the U.S. intervened, and in 6 short weeks was able to help Cuba liberate itself from Spain. This was known as the Splendid Little War. The U.S. government requested that the Cuban government amend their new constitution, in it allowing the U.S. to lease or sell a part of the territory to use as a naval base. Cuba did so grudgingly. In turn, the U.S. agreed to use Guantanamo Bay as a coaling and naval station, allowing any vessels that were engaging in trade with Cuba free passage. Cuba then agreed to lease the 45 square miles of territory to the United States for $2,000 in gold coins a year as lease payment. And so the base was officially established in December 1903. Unlike most leases, this one does not have an end date. The U.S. can use the territory indefinitely, unless they both come to a mutual agreement to end the lease. 30 years later, in 1934, the treaty between the United States of America and Cuba was signed by President Roosevelt and the Cuban government. This amended the terms of the lease to increase the lease payment for roughly $4,085 a year. The U.S. continues to pay that amount until this very date. After the treaty was signed, the base continued to exist in the Caribbean, seemingly issue-free until 1959.
Following the Communist Revolution and Fidel Castro taking power in 1959, Cuba's attitude toward the U.S. and his Gimolese has changed. The Cuban government has refused to cash its U.S. rent checks for more than 55 years. Castro literally has stuffed the uncashed checks in his death drawer. In 1964, in response to the U.S. fining Cubans for fishing too close to Florida, Castro cut off Gimo's water supply for 3 days. Castro then turned the water back on but claimed the U.S. had been stealing the country's water. After the war, Gimo's base commander John Buckley devised a simple solution to that. He cut off Gimo's water supply lines from Cuba. Out of necessity, this led to Gimo becoming self-sufficient, creating his own system to collect and convert seawater to fresh water. Over the years, many military and diplomatic escalations have occurred between the two countries. And while the political difficulties continue, the military relationship has stabilized, but this wasn't always the case. Cuba began availing itself of the media to complain about the U.S. presence at Gimo. In the mid-1970s, the Cuban Ministry of Foreign Affairs published an 86-page booklet, Guantanamo, Yankee Naval Base of Crimes and Provocations. Shortly thereafter, during a 1977 Barbara Waters interview with Castro, discussion of the 1934 treaty led the Cuban leader to argue. When one mentions an undetermined length of time in a legal contract, it's understood that it's a mean 100 years. Regardless, both Cuba and the U.S. understand that the agreement will continue to exist until both sides agree to modify or repeal it. According to the Cuban newspaper Grammar, the base imposed a different type of conduct on individuals who find themselves affected by the presence of the base. Special legal regulations exist, which make people feel uncomfortable in their own environment, and sometimes oblige them live in a different way. The Guantanamo native mentioned restrictions of movement throughout the area and prohibited zone closed off with a 2-meter high triple fence of 15 to 18 strands of barbed wire and other materials. No Cuban from another province can freely visit the area without first requesting permission from authorities. In the military ranges, they conduct exercise with combat aircraft and mechanized equipment that break the sound barrier and cause deafening noises. Therefore, there are a number of people who suffer hearing problems or associated illness like headaches, stomach aches, and dizziness, plus psychological problems caused by stress. Residents of Camarera cannot enjoy several beaches with excellent conditions located around Guantanamo Bay because of the U.S. base and have also seen the impact on fishing, which was once one of the area's principal economic activities. There is a nautical sport academy in the municipality, and as a result of the limitations, the athlete cannot swim long distance, but rather train in a circular fashion. This affects their performance since they must adapt when competing in national or international events, losing time and slowing down to make the return lap. Coaches say this should be the opposite, with a swimmer picking up speed and maximizing physical effort to conclude the race. But this time and habit is not easily acquired in these conditions.
Americans' view on the naval base has changed throughout the years. The naval base is very similar to an American town. According to the U.S. military, roughly 9,500 service members and their families live and work on the base. Most of its citizens love living there, thankful for the beautiful landscape, the Caribbean Sea, and all the activities associated with island living. Inside of the base, you can find many of the amenities we have here at home. There's even a McDonald's, an Irish pub, and schools for both elementary and high school students. The base is separated from communist Cuba by a 17-mile stretch of spiked fence and cactus plants, known as the Cactus Curtain. Before September 11, 2001, when the U.S. was the victim of the worst terrorist attack on American soil to date, little thought was given to the base by everyday Americans, especially those who lived outside of Florida, where the largest population of Cuban immigrants live, or those that didn't have any ties to the island. After September 11, 2001, the Guantanamo Bay detention camp was established to detain prisoners from the War on Terror, and as a result, you cannot think of the base without envisioning the images that were portrayed on the media channels of prisoners in cages, claims of torture and violence. According to HumanRightsFirst.org, the camp base has held 780 detainees, many with claims of unfair treatment at the camp. The future of the base is unknown. On January 22, 2009, President Barack Obama signed executive order to close the base within a year. But the difficulties of relocating the prisoners, no one wanted them in their town, halted the closing, and to date, the camp remains open. According to the U.S. military site, some of the camp is deteriorated, and the base has requested almost $20 million in aid to update the camp. As of January 2019, about 40 prisoners still remain on the base, and their future has yet to be decided.
Cuando a los marines de un puertón bien grande, era diferente, abrían así uno para acá y otro para allá para que el carro pasara Y cuando yo vi el marín, yo sentí que abrieron, que ya cerraron. Yo dije, tierra libre. Pero no fue free. Free de Fidel Castro, pero para mí tenía mi corazón partido por mi familia.
In the early 1960s, Gloria Martinez and hundreds of other anti-Castro Cubans took refuge on the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay. Half a century later, 24 of them still live here.
The Navy take care of us really good here. They don't charge you rent. And a lot of things that they give you here, you know, that if you live somewhere else, you'd have to pay for it.
The Guantanamo Cubans are one of those quirks of history, a small group of people battered by decisions made long ago and by world events beyond their control. The exiles have lived their adult lives within a 17-mile perimeter fence. They've married and divorced, raised children and grown old. When they get sick, Navy doctors care for them. When they die, they're buried near the beach in the base cemetery. Most live in a neighborhood of single-story houses provided by the U.S. Navy, a Cuban village recreated on an American naval base. Around the 1959 Cuban Revolution, Guantanamo was a bustling American base. Thousands of Cubans commuted to jobs on the base. But as relations frayed between Washington and Havana, desperate Cuban workers sought safety on the base. Engaged in a Cold War duel with Fidel Castro and the Soviets, President John F. Kennedy was happy to give them shelter.
I have emphasized before that this was a struggle of Cuban patriots against the Cuban dictator.
Many refugees, such as Ramon Romero, had relatives imprisoned or killed for opposing the Castro regime.
My grandfather said to stay here, or otherwise you're going to end up in jail or dead.
At some point during the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and all that time frame, we started legitimizing people that said, hey, I don't want to go back to their side. And at the time, the Navy offered them a safe haven. And we said, hey, you're welcome to stay here until this gets resolved.